Hello everyone, welcome back to part 4 of our crop keeper paper mache build. In the last segment we worked on sculpting out the tree trunk, and then off camera just want to show you these are wet, but these are my arms and my hands, and I put a layer of clay over them, or most of them. You're not going to be able to sculpt all of these out in one sitting because it gets, obviously you're going to need something to hold on to, which is the end. I left the ends of my arms, and then as you can see, I have them sitting inside a plastic lid of a bowl because I know that when they dry they won't stick. So if you're putting this on like a piece of wood or a piece of cardboard, you're going to have a hard time lifting them off without them adhering to that surface. So plastic, if you have a piece of plastic, put them on something like this, put them in front of a fan. They're pretty rough. I didn't really do too many, actually I didn't do any details on them at all. I didn't even use my paintbrush with my paste and smooth them out. I just left them rough. Once this part is dry, I'm going to go in and I will apply another layer of clay down here. Once that's dry, my plan is to go in and build up some details, and then sculpt in some more details to make them look a little bit more interesting instead of just these weird looking claws. If you're following along, you're going to do this on your own. You're going to be very, very tempted when you get to the end here of your fingers to point them and make them protrude out a little bit more than what you have as far as your armature inside of here, and that's fine. You can do that a little bit. But one thing that I want you to keep in mind is that if you build it up too much outside of where your wire armature is, you're not going to have any, obviously you won't have any armature in there, and that's going to be a point where you could have some breakage later on. Paper mache is, it's very strong, it's very sturdy, but it's not bulletproof. So anywhere where there's not armature and you're building on top of that, that's going to be a weak point because you don't have that armature inside there. Anyway, on that note, if you do have some paper mache art that you've made and you've had some damage to them, I do have a video on my channel, and if I remember, I'll post it in the description of this video on how to repair damaged paper mache art. It's pretty simple. It's not hard to do, but you kind of want to avoid it anyway. Alright, so I'm going to set these aside here. I am going to put these in front of fans so that they can dry. And in the meantime, I wanted to show you what I've done here with the tree trunk. I have built out or sculpted out the entire tree trunk. I did sections at a time, so that's the reason why you have these variations in the color of the clay. Down here where there's some thicker clay, that's still a little bit wet. Over here where it's not so thick, it's a thinner amount of clay, that's where it's a little bit lighter in color because it's drying. It's not completely dry, but it is drying. And then up here from this point on, this is very fresh clay that I just finished layering on and sculpting in. I left a quarter size, like the coin size quarter, not a quarter inch, but the coin, where I'm going to insert my arms because I want to have enough room. I want to make sure that after I clay this over, I can easily insert that, make a hole in there and insert that, and it'll fit. And I could clay around that, make it nice and sturdy inside there. A couple other details that I want to point out is that when you are sculpting, you can put in some really cool details. I showed you in the last video how you could take a pencil. You can use a a wooden skewer or a toothpick, anything like that, and make in, you know, when the clay is dry, obviously, you know, just kind of press in, drag in a little bit. You don't want to drag too much because then you're going to disrupt a lot of the clay, but you do want to press in enough, deep enough, so that when this is dry and you go to paint it, that texture is going to come through your paint. The other thing that I did is I put in some other little details here, like, you know, a piece of this wood that has, or a piece of the tree that maybe some birds, some woodpeckers or something like that had got to and was pecking away and created this hole. I put in some other little holes, you know, to make it look more natural. I did the same thing right here. I kind of put in a little bit of a detail there. So there are many, many different things that you could do as far as that's concerned and making your piece a little bit more interesting. I don't know if you could see, that, but way down here, I very, very minutely put in like a little door, you know. So there are a lot of different things that you could do with the clay. You could put in as many details as you want, or you could just sculpt in your wood grain and call it done. But anyway, we're at this point where I'm going to continue on with the sculpt on the tree trunk by adding in some smaller coils of clay to kind of build up around and in some areas, just to make it a little bit more interesting. Again, it's always blending it more interest. I have not done any kind of sculpting or anything on my jack-o'-lantern just yet. I'm hoping that I will be able to later on, in a few days, do like a time-lapse video where you could see me sculpting out the jack-o'-lantern. Again, I do have my holes here already, but I'm gonna leave when I go into sculpt, like I mentioned in the last segment of this tutorial. Again, I'm gonna leave a quarter size around that hole. It's just so I can ensure myself that I have enough room to insert my arms after they get clayed over and bulked up some more. Alright, so on that note, let's carry on. I'm going to show you how to build in a little bit more detail, if that's what you're into, using coils of clay. Alright guys, so I've got my, my clay here. I actually made another fresh batch of clay, and I have my paste. Creating these coils to lend this a little bit more interest, it's very simple. You just take some of your paper mache clay and roll it into a coil. You can use the table, your table surface to do that, or just your hands. Some of it's going to break off, not a big deal. You can make these thick, you can make these thin. I mean, whatever suits you. And I'm going to start here on the bottom, and anywhere where I think it needs a little bit more interest, especially like around, you know, these areas. You don't want to put a whole lot. I mean, I'm not going to put a whole lot of detail in these recessed areas because I like the way they look. But I just want to kind of put a little bit here and there. And it's pretty simple. And I could just take that piece that had broken off and just add to that as well. Now this section of my clay down here, it's not wet, you know, per se, but it's not completely dry either. So I'm taking my my bowl of paste, and I have my smaller paintbrush for this because that's a smaller area. And whether you can, again, I mentioned this before, you can either do this when your base layer of clay is dry, or if it's still wet, it doesn't matter. It will still stick. But either way, to make sure, you want to make sure that you're going to blend in those areas. So that's where this paste really comes in. Blend them in so it looks like a cohesive piece, so that, and when I say blend, let me turn this so that hopefully you could see. Where you don't want it to look like you just took a coil of clay, slapped it on there. It basically looks like you just put that on there and just went with it without giving it any other thought. But to make it look like there was no stop and go starting points, and that's kind of the idea of this, you want to blend. Make sure you're blending in those areas. And already, I mean, that looks pretty cool. So the other thing that I want to point out, okay, there's my little door. I didn't do too much. I just felt like, I'm gonna put a little like hobbit or, you know, I don't know, fairy little thing. The bottom part of this, you can put some roots in there by doing the same, it's the same technique. You know, I'm taking a bigger coil of my clay, and you could really just kind of put in some roots where they come in and actually sit on your, whether you've used a piece of wood or, you know, the cardboard, the layered up pieces of cardboard as your base. It will work just fine if you wanted to add that all the way down, which is what I'm doing now. And again, I'm just going in and just blending it, especially those edges. I want to blend those edges in so that it doesn't look like I stopped and then slapped that on there without giving it any kind of thought. And as you could see where I just blended this section in. Then you can also, you know, you could take your fingers, blend that in down here, blend that in on the sides. And because I'm using a piece of wood, and paper mache is basically paper fibers, paper mache clay, it's going to adhere. Won't be any kind of issues with it adhering to either a piece of cardboard that you have for your base or a piece of wood. There you go. This section right here, this is that first little coil that I added onto this in our last segment to show you what it looked like. And then you want to, you know, add in, make sure you're adding in your wood grain in there, anywhere where you have those coils, your roots. But that's what that looks like. It's going to look really cool. I'm going to continue on. I'll put some, so I'm going to put a little bit, maybe a little bit in here. You don't have to overdo it. I mean, you can do as much as you want. But I'm going to tilt this camera up a little bit more. Go to the top. And I did clay over the top of this because it's wet. I don't want to tilt it or anything like that. But I did clay over the top. You know, a thin layer of clay. You don't need anything big or thick. And I smooth that out because that's where the jack-o'-lantern topper is going to sit. But I think it's, you know, it's wise to add any kind of coil to areas where you think, well, this looks kind of funny in this area, you know, so I think I'll just add a little bit, you know, to wherever I think I need it. But that is pretty much the idea of this process. It's very simple. Takes a little bit of time, but I think giving yourself those little bit more details in there goes a long way. Alright guys, so we did a little bit of work here. I showed you how to layer on some coils. I showed you the little bit of added details that I sculpted in to my tree trunk. And I also showed you just the beginning stages of claying over the hands and the arms. Next segment, we're going to continue on with the sculpting. I'm going to finish up my tree trunk, putting in some more of those coils and those details off camera, and finish that up completely. So that'll be done and dried for the next segment. And also in the next segment, I'm going to show you what I do to kind of lend the hands and those arms a little bit more interest in making them look more tree-like instead of just these clayed over claw things. So that's going to be really important too. And then maybe if I have enough time in the next segment, I'll do kind of like a fast forward time lapse type thing and show you how I kind of sculpt in my my jack-o'-lantern here. But until then, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one, part 5.